elements on your page, how to use divs and block level elements to create a 2-column page layout, how to create a floating page layout, how to use alternative positioning such as absolute and relative, and how to create layers with z-index. For this lesson, I created a new document called CSS Page Layout, which once again is a copy of my template.html file, and I have added some elements to it. So using prior lessons, what I have done so far is I created a list of links up here. These are some links that don't necessarily work yet, but I just want you to see how they work. I added a home link, about us, FAQ for frequently asked questions, and a contact us page. And if you'll notice that they show up in the list over here. I also added some CSS elements to modify the page a little bit. The first thing that I did was I set some styles for the body. I changed the font family for everything to Arial sans serif. The background color is this bluish green color. The header and the footer, I changed the color of the text. The footer, I aligned the text to the center, and the other thing that I've done with it is I've reduced the font size to 80% of its original size by using the 0.80 em. Remember, em is a percentage of the original size. I styled the unordered lists, list items, and any list item that also happens to be an anchor tag so that it is this color, which if you notice is the darker color. And then also I styled that if it's a list item that is an anchor tag that we hover over, then it will turn this other color. So we get the nice hover color when we go over top of these links. The last thing that I styled is the content section, which remember the content is the part of our document that actually contains our content. And I created a border that is 1 pixel solid, almost black. It has a background color of this gray. It has a minimum height. Now the last time we just simply set height, and the difference between height and min height is that it's going to be at least this tall, but unlike last time where the text went outside of the box, in this one, because it's min height, I will allow this box to grow with the contents that are inside of it. The other thing that I've done is I set a border radius to get these rounded corners of 10 pixels. So what I want to do is I want to start creating a layout that contains 2 columns, which is what we're typically used to seeing in web pages. To start making this, I am going to make 2 divs. And what I am doing is everything is going to be contained inside of this content div. And what I want to see is one div that's about 150 pixels wide, so I'll have a column, and then another one that starts about 155 pixels over and takes up the remainder of this space. So inside of my content div, I am going to create 2 more divs, and I'm going to call the first one left column, and I'm going to call the other one right column. Okay, so that's it. Now if I save my document and then I refresh, you'll not see anything happen, but what I actually just did is I created 2 block level elements that are up here on top of each other that are taking up a little bit of space. They don't really have any height yet except for the border that they contain. So I want to start styling them, and I want to show you how we actually manipulate them. Okay, so these are IDs. So to reference an ID up in my CSS, I'm going to put a £, left column, and what do I want to have applied to it? And then also the same thing with right column, and what is going to be applied to it. Okay, so in both of these, what I'm going to do is just simply turn on the border. So it's 1 pixel solid black, and border is 1 pixel solid black. And so now if you watch up here at the top of the page, when I refresh, you'll only see a little bit of a change, but watch right here. Watch right here. There you go. See how I got a black border here? What I actually just did is I got two divs that are both 2 pixels tall. And the reason for it is there is a border of 1 pixel. And so I have the border for the top and the border for the bottom together make up 2 pixels. And the one underneath is 1 pixel on top, 1 pixel on the bottom, so 2 more pixels. So I haven't really done anything. So what I want to do is I want to give these a height. And so for right now, I'm going to say that their min height is 200 pixels. This way we can actually see them do something. So I'm going to say min height 200 pixels. And then when I save this, now what I have are 2 divs. One is up here on the top, one is in the bottom. But I don't want them on top of each other. I want them left and right. Before I can start putting these side by side, I need to do a couple of things. So my left column div, I am going to specify its width. And its width is going to be 150 pixels. So when I refresh, I can see that that div is now 150 pixels. What I want to do with the other one is I want to set it so that its left margin starts at 155 pixels. So I don't care what its width is. I want it to automatically be the additional size. So go all the way from about 155 pixels all the way to the right, regardless of how wide the window is. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the margin left property and specify that this margin is 155 pixels from the left. Okay, so now when I refresh, now I get something like this. And if you notice, they're not side by side. In the last video, I showed you that it is possible to take a block level element, such as a div, and float it alongside of another element. So I am going to specify that my left column is going to float to the left side of the next element in the page. And when I do this, I now get these 2 columns side by side. Now what will happen is when I maximize my screen, you'll notice that the div on the left side does not change. The div on the right side, its left side doesn't change where it is, but it now takes up the entire width of the rest of the page. So what I've done now is I've simply made it where I now have a left column and I have a right column, and what it's doing is just simply allowing my data to be contained in 2 separate columns, but they're 2 separate divs that I can treat separately. In our modern style layouts for web pages, we typically don't see the list of links up here like this. We're used to seeing these links side by side, and then we see links down the left side. And typically the links that go across the top are more frequently used links. So things just like home, about us, fact, and contact us, those will be listed side by side. And then down the side, especially on blogging sites, you'll see things like articles. If you are on a cooking website, you'll see different types of recipes down the side. If it's an automotive website, you'll see the different categories for parts. So what I want to do is I want to have 2 lists of links, and these are both going to be unordered lists. So what I am going to do is in my left column, I am going to make another unordered list. Okay, and actually I'm going to give this unordered list an ID, and I'm going to call it, left links. Okay, so these are the links that are in the left column. All right, and so inside of this, then I'm going to contain list items. So my first item is going to be ahref equals, and let's pretend I had a file called article1.html. This would be article1. And then I'm going to have a second article. So ahref equals article2.html. And so forth. All right, so what I have done is I just simply copied that last article, and now I have 9 different article links that are listed down the side. And the thing is that these are still list item links. So they are going to inherit the CSS properties that the ones up above get. So they will look the same. All right, I don't want this border around here anymore, so I want to get rid of the border. And so it's going to be under left column. We'll get rid of the border. And so now I have something that looks like this. All right, so we will start styling these. And the way that I'm going to style these is by using CSS to manipulate the way that these unordered list line items are styled. To style these, I want to get rid of the bullet, and the bullet is called a list style. So I want to get rid of this list style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, for my unordered list that exists in left links. So I'm going to say left links, and if I see an UL, then what I'm going to do is format it a certain way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say list style type is none. And when I refresh, to get rid of these bullets, this is what's called a list style type. And what I want to do is I want to specify that any line items that exist in left links will not have a list style type. So what I'm going to do in my code is left links. Okay, and in left links, if we see an LI, then it will be formatted this way. And so the way that it will get styled is list style type, and we're going to set that to none, so that way we don't get any style. Refresh, and now they're gone. Okay, now the catch is going to be that right now these things are indented because the bullet actually still does take up some room. So I can play with the padding and I can play with the margin in this to make it move to the left a little bit. The margin I'm not going to play with in the left links LI because the left links LI really does take up this area. The LIs start with the A. So if I were to do the padding and the margin right here, it would move them right from there. What I want to play with is the actual left links area. So I'm going to specify left links, and inside of left links, I want my padding to be something like 10 pixels. And so now when I refresh, it pulls those over to the left. Okay, but I don't want all the padding because it just bumped everything down. So it's padding left, and now they start closer to the top. Now I can also play with the margin left, and I could set that to 5 pixels or so forth. And remember, the margin is from the outside of the container to the outside of this container. And then the padding is from the inside of this container to the beginning of the contents. You always have to keep in mind the box model. It's always padding is inside, margin is outside. Some other things that I want to play with are when I look at these links on the side, I'm used to seeing links that don't have an underline. And so what I am going to do is I want to specify that if it is in the left links, and it is an LI, and it is an anchor tag, then we're not going to show the underline. So I'm going to say left links. Okay, and so if it's in left links and it is an LI that also happens to be an anchor tag, then format it this way. So we're going to say text decoration is none. Refresh, and now the lines go away. Okay, now the thing is I also expect the underline to come back when I hover over top of these. So I'm going to add another one of these. So if it's in left links, and it is an LI, and it's an anchor tag that I hover over, then do this. So then we'll put the text decoration back to underline. Refresh, and now when I hover over these, I get it where it changes color and they underline for me. So this is more what I'm used to seeing for links. So we'll have our articles down the side here. We click on one of these links, it will take us to a different web page. These pages just don't exist yet. And we're getting something that looks more like what we're used to seeing in a two column format. So I have links over here and content will be over here on the side. The next thing that I'm doing is I just copied in our dummy text that we used in prior lessons, and I want this dummy text to be in the right column. And if you notice right now, my right column div is only this large. Now, because I specified for the right column that its minimum height is 200, I'm allowing this div to grow in size as it needs. Okay, and then the other thing that I am doing is because my actual content div is also a minimum height, I am allowing this section to grow in height also. So what happens is I put a whole bunch of text in, which is going to force my page to be too much text to fit on this div. Well, when I save this and refresh, if you watch, this div will stretch and so will the entire contents of the page. So now if I scroll down, I can still see that my div has this black border here, and I can see that the text goes all the way down, but it is all still contained inside of our actual content div. All right, so I no longer need this this black border here, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the border from our right column. Save this, refresh, and there we go. Now we have a two-column layout. All right, so now with these links, this might be over just a little bit too much, but if I had longer links in here, I would definitely want this space for it. Now we will encounter some white space down here. This is okay, users expect this. But what you can use this for is to provide things like graphical information. You can provide advertisements, things of that nature in this white space over here. When I make my page maximized, you will see that our div is 400 pixels tall because that was our minimum height, and all of our text is still contained in here. So it is going to stay within the div, and then the div just simply resizes as it needs based on the size of the page. So however much stuff is in here will change the way that this div looks. The next thing that I want to do with my document is I want to add some pictures to it. So I'm going to start adding pictures, and we are going to put them before this first paragraph. To include the pictures on our web page, we need to remember that they are in a folder relative to where our document is actually located. Now our document is located in this universal class folder, but my images are under images, and then I created another folder called flowers. And what I want to do is get all of these flowers listed on our page. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making my image tags. So don't forget, our image tags are image source equals and then the name of the flower or the name of the file. But in this case, it's not just carnation.jpg. I have to list to go to the images and the flowers folder. So I'm going to say images /flowers/carnation.jpg. Then our images also have some other attributes that need to be defined. So we have our alt is equal to a carnation. This is our alternative text. The width is going to be equal to 225, and the height is going to be equal to 150. An image is a self-closing tag, so we put a / and then our bracket. So if I go over to my page and I refresh, I now get an image. All right, so I want to make it where all of my images appear, and I don't want them all to be straight up and down the page, so we're going to have to figure out how. All right, so before we do fix it, though, I'm just simply going to add all of my pictures, and they're all going to be a copy of this. So I'm going to have another image here, and to make it easier on myself, I'm going to delete these two values. Copy this whole thing, and I know that I have 6 images to play with, so I need these images in here. Okay, so just to space them out, make it a little easier to see. Okay, so this one is pink Plumeria. And its alt is also going to be pink Plumeria. And then we do the same thing with all the other flowers. So I now have all of my pictures added. And if I come over here and refresh my page, I will get something that looks like this. Now, if you notice, each one is going to be straight up and down from each other. And actually, if I make the page wider, they will actually be side by side from each other because they are just simply inline element. But I don't want it to be like this. I want it to have the text wrap around. I want it to look nicer. So I want to do some things to these images to make them appear a little bit better, but I also want to provide a caption underneath of each of these pictures to explain what exactly the picture is. To do this, I'm going to treat each one of these as an HTML5 element called a figure. And what I am going to do is I'm going to take my image and actually put it inside of a figure tag. So something like this. And what I have is my figure has an image source, and then it will also have a thing called a fig caption. And the fig caption is just simply some text. So this flower is a carnation bouquet. And so now what happens is when I refresh my page over here, now I have this thing called a carnation bouquet that is in an element called a figure. And what happens is the carnation bouquet words will remain with the image no matter where this image goes on the page. So I'm going to do the same thing with the next picture. So I put it inside of a figure. And then I'm going to have a fig caption. And this fig caption is going to be for a pink Plumeria. And then on the next line here, we are going to close our figure. Okay, so now save it, refresh the page, and now that one is also a figure. So I want to do this with all of my images. So what I've done is I just went through and I made all of these images over here into figures, and by doing so, when I refresh, you will see that each one of these now gets a caption underneath of it. And like I said before, the caption will remain with the picture no matter where the picture goes on the page, which is important because we are going to start doing what is called responsive web design. We want the web page to automatically resize, change shape, do different things based on how big the window is. So these images, we want it to have the caption with it. Because we now have an element called a figure, I can actually apply CSS elements to all of these up in my CSS. So what I'm going to do is I want to take anything that is a figure and I want to style it a certain way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to set a border, once again, a 1 pixel solid black. And I want to do something like a background color. And we'll set the background color to EC. So that way it's almost white. And what I want to do is I want to make these look like the old Polaroid photos, where you have the photograph and we could write the description underneath of it. So we're going to work and turn it into something like that. Okay, so now I know that my figure here has a specific width, and so what we're going to do is we're going to start working to actually turn it into something that will look more like these Polaroids. Okay, so now the EC is the same color as our background, so that actually doesn't stand out enough. I'm going to make it a full white. That way you can see that they do have a different background to them. Okay, and I can do some other things, like I could set the width for this, I could set the height, but we're going to play with some other styles that are available to us first. Now the problem that we're having right now is that this thing is wrapping, and I'm sorry, not wrapping, but what it's doing is it is taking the picture and it is creating a div of its own that goes all the way over to the border. And remember, we have our margin and then we have some padding inside. And what's going on is my figure is taking up all the rest of the room over there, and I don't want it to do that. I want it to only take up enough room for what is actually considered this picture. Okay, so, I'm sorry, not the picture, but the figure. All right, so what I am going to do is in my figure, I am going to play with the float. Just like I did with my left column, I can make this float left. And when I make it float left, when I refresh this, now what I get is something that looks like this. All right, so you'll see here that it doesn't necessarily look like the Polaroid yet that I want it to look like. So what I want to play with is the padding. I have padding inside of this that I can add to it. So I can add a 5-pixel padding, refresh, and now I get a nice little border that goes all the way around it, and I have a caption at the bottom. Okay, so I also want to play with my fig caption. So my fig caption, I would like to have that thing centered. So I have a fig caption that I can play with. And then what I can do with that is do something like text align center. And when I come over and refresh, now they are all centered. Now it's starting to look more like what I expect a Polaroid to look like. All right, so the padding here on the sides is good. And the padding on the bottom, I would like this to be a little bit more. Okay, so the same way that I showed you with the border that I could specify the different sides in one figure, I'm going to do the same thing here. And it's going to be, I want to set the padding for the top, for the right, for the bottom, and for the left. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be that my top is 5 pixels, my right is 5 pixels, the bottom though is 10 pixels, and the left is 5 pixels. And now when I refresh, this will extend just a little bit, and it's starting to look more like the figure that I expected to look like. I have now done 2 things with my page. One is I made it where each of my images has a caption and looks kind of like a Polaroid, but I have also, by floating these to the left, made it where these images will automatically get to the left and the text will wrap to the right. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to maximize this, and what you will see is that the images will display in such a manner that they will automatically arrange themselves on the left, but there will still be text on the right side. So I now have a web page that if I change the size of it, as I drag this and change the size, you will see that the images automatically move to wherever they need to be, so that way the text is still there on the right-hand side. This is called responsive design. I am starting to make things move around on the page to make room for the size of the actual browser window. So what I've done so far is I've added links on the left side here. I've removed the text decoration, or the text decoration and the list style. And now I want to play with the links that are up here. I don't want to see links on top of each other here. I want to see them wide. So we are going to play with actually styling those links. Okay, so I want to start styling these links up here. And instead of seeing them straight up and down like this, I want to see them side by side. And we will work there one step at a time, and I'll show you how this works. All right, the first thing that I know is that all of these links belong in my nav section. So everything that I'm going to manipulate right now is going to belong to nav. Okay, and what do I want to manipulate? Well, I want to manipulate my unordered list. And my unordered list, I want to turn off the list style type. So we're going to set that to none. Okay, so when I come over here, now I turned off my bulleted list. Okay, so I don't see the bullets anymore. And what I want to do is I want to show to you how this works. So I'm going to put a border around it. Now this is just temporary. We will remove the border later. So I'm going to say the border is 1 pixel solid white. refresh, and now you can see the border. Okay, so now what you need to pay attention to is that our UL actually goes all the way from the left side all the way to the right side. It takes up all of these. It is a block level element. I don't necessarily want to do that, and I will show you why here in just a minute. I want to start styling the individual links over here. So what I'm going to do now is my nav section for my LIs, I'm going to format them a specific way. Now these are not just particular LIs, these happen to be anchor tags, so I also want to format my nav A tags somehow. Okay, so how do I want to format those? I want to format those where the text decoration is none. I don't want to see the underline. So when I come over and refresh, now when I'm over these, you'll see that they don't have an underline, but I do want them to underline when I hover over them. So just like I did the links on the side here, I need to play with my pseudo classes. So I'm going to say nav A hover, and when I hover over it, now it does get a text decoration of underline. Refresh, and now you'll see that these change color and they underline, so that's good. That's what I want it to do. Okay, I want to get all of these links on one line. And the way that I'm going to do that is by playing with the nav LI. Right now they are displayed as line breaks. Each LI gets displayed with its own line break and each one's on its own line. Well, instead of doing that, I want to display these what's called inline. And by displaying these in line, what I will get is that they are all side by side. So now it's starting to look more like the type of links that I expect to see at the top of our document. All right, but what you'll notice is it's still going all the way from one side to the other side, and I need to fix that somehow. Now, an unordered list is always going to be a full width element. So what I need to do is I need to tell it that this thing is supposed to be treated like some other type of element that doesn't do that, like a table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it, hey, display this thing as if it were a table, because a table does not necessarily go the full width of the page. A table is only the width of whatever it actually contains. So I'm going to display this as a table, and now when I refresh, you'll notice that it now only goes over to the contact us. That's its width. But I have this little bit of space over here that I don't want to have. Now this is from the inside of the border to the content, so this is padding. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to remove the padding by setting it to 0 pixels. And I get something that looks more like this. But I really want this thing to be centered on the page. So what I'm going to do to center this on the page is I'm going to play with the left and the right margin. Now, the left margin and right margin, if I set them to a certain amount of pixels, then I could force it to be so many pixels from the left or so many pixels from the right. But if I do something like margin left auto and margin right auto, then what I'm telling the system is, hey, figure out what the amount of space it would need to center this thing on the page. And now it looks like this. All right, so now we're used to seeing these with a little divider in between them. And the way that we do this is by simply coming down here to our list items and adding a new list item of a non-breaking space, a vertical pipe, which is shift and the key above your enter key, and another non-breaking space. Okay, so I'm going to take this and copy it between each of these items that is in my unordered list. So now when I refresh, now I get something that's spaced out a little bit more. I get these little dividers, and when I hover over these, I will actually have them highlight. All right, I don't want the border around there anymore, so I'm going to remove the border. Refresh the page, and now we just have our links. So we have links. They change color. The text decoration changes. These are still an unordered list, and these are all list items in our unordered list, but we are formatting it as if they are just simple inline elements, inside of a table. The last topic that I want to discuss is the creation of layers. And we create layers with this thing called a z-index. So what I want to do is I want to include our smiley face that we used in other lessons, and we are actually going to put them on our page. Now our smiley face, I just simply want to stick it over top of this other stuff here on the page. And what I want to do is, I don't care if it overlaps something else. It is not necessarily going to be inside of this div. So what I am doing is I'm going to place it outside of our content div. I'm going to make a completely separate div outside, and I will call it smiley. And this div is going to be where we put the graphic for our smiley face. The smiley face that I want to use is smiley.png, which is located under the images folder. So I am just simply going to make the image source equal to images/smiley.png. Its alt text is going to be that it is a smiley face. Its width is going to be equal to, let's see how big this is, 350 by 370. So the width is 350. Let's actually make it smaller. Let's make it 250 by 250. Now remember, by doing it this way, I'm not actually resizing the original. I'm only resizing how it's displayed on the page. And this is a self-closing tag, so we close it. Okay, so if I refresh the page over here, that div by default exists after the div for our content. And I don't want my smiley face to be here. I want it to be up further on the page. This is what's called relative or natural flow. And what I mean by that is this item naturally in the text document exists after the div for the content. So when we display it, it should be displayed here underneath of it. But I don't want it displayed here. I want it displayed more something along the lines of up here right above these flowers. Okay, so I have a couple of ways I could do this. One would be for me to actually cut the div from the bottom and paste it here in the right column somewhere near these flowers. Or the other way that we can do it is by styling through CSS. And that is actually how we are going to do it. So the section that we want is it's called smiley, so it's #smiley. And then the styles that we want to apply to it will get pasted in here. So I don't want to move the actual text for the smiley face. I just simply want to tell the system through CSS to move it somewhere else. Okay, so what I want to do is I don't want my smiley face to show up on the page relative to where it should have shown up. I want to position it in some absolute location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that the position of this particular element is going to be in an absolute location on the page. And the absolute location is going to be in the terms of pixels from the top or from the bottom and from the left or the right. So this particular picture, I want to put it from the top down 110 pixels. And from the left, I want to put it in 200 pixels. So this means that it will come down 110 pixels and it will come over from the left 200 pixels to place this element. The last piece of information that I need to do this is I need to start creating what are called layers, and layers in CSS are referred to as what's called a z-index. Okay, so a z-index is just simply a way to state what layer these things are on, because I can take 3, 4, 5 pictures and stack them on top of each other, but I have to tell CSS how to do it. By default, everything that I have created so far is on z-index 0. So what I want to do is I want to create this image on a layer that is higher, meaning in front of the stuff in the background. So I want to create it on a number higher than 0. So I'm going to create this image on z-index of 10. And the reason that I'm doing this is that way I know if I have other things that are in a z-index of anywhere from 1 through 9 that this smiley face will still show up in front of all of those. So I'm going to refresh my page, and now my smiley face that should have been down here at the bottom isn't there, but instead it is here on top of another element on the page. What allows me to do that is the absolute position and also the z-index. In this lesson, you learned about floating divs and other elements. You learned about creating a floating 2-column layout. You learned about displaying unordered lists and list item elements in line. You learned about figures and fig caption. You learned about the difference between absolute and relative positioning, and also about how to create layers with the